You're working on 100 different things and getting nowhere. You're busy all the time, but barely making progress, and you're exhausted because you're spreading yourself too thin, trying to do everything and accomplishing nothing meaningful. But there's a principle that will change everything, the 80-20 principle, also called the Pareto principle, and it says this: 80% of your results come from 20% of your actions, which means most of what you're doing doesn't matter. And if you can identify the 20% that does matter and focus there, you'll accomplish more in less time than you ever thought possible. For years, I worked hard on everything. I treated every task as equally important, every opportunity as worth pursuing, every goal as worth chasing. And I was busy, constantly. But I wasn't making meaningful progress because I was focusing on the 80% of actions that create only 20% of results and ignoring the 20% of actions that create 80% of results. I was working hard, but not smart. Then I learned the 80-20 principle, and everything changed. I started identifying the few things that actually moved the needle, the few relationships that actually mattered, the few activities that actually created results, and I cut everything else. And my productivity exploded, not because I worked harder, but because I stopped wasting energy on things that didn't matter. Here's what we're covering. First, what the 80-20 principle actually is and why most people completely misunderstand it. Second, how to identify your critical 20% in any area of your life so you know where to focus. And third, how to apply the 80-20 principle to your work, relationships, health, and goals so you get exponentially better results with less effort. Let's start with what the 80-20 principle actually means. It's a mathematical observation that shows up everywhere. In business, 80% of revenue comes from 20% of customers. In your wardrobe, you wear 20% of your clothes 80% of the time. In your work, 20% of your tasks create 80% of your value. The numbers aren't always exact. Sometimes it's 90-10, sometimes 70-30, but the pattern is consistent. A small number of inputs create most of the outputs. Here's what this means for your life. Most of what you do doesn't matter. It's busy work. It makes you feel productive, but it's not creating meaningful results. Meanwhile, there's a small number of activities that create massive results. And if you're not ruthlessly focused on those activities, you're wasting your time. You're working hard, but you're working on the wrong things. Most people don't understand this. They think, if I do more, I'll get more. So they work longer hours. They say yes to everything. They try to optimize everything, and they're exhausted because they're optimizing the 80% that doesn't matter while neglecting the 20% that does. And that's why they're stuck. Not because they're not working hard enough, but because they're working on the wrong things. Think about your own life. What are you spending most of your time on? Emails, meetings, social media, busy work? Now ask yourself, is this creating meaningful results, or is this just keeping you busy? For most people, the answer is brutal. They're spending 80% of their time on things that create only 20% of their results, and they wonder why they're not making progress. Now here's how you identify your critical 20% in any area so you know exactly where to focus your time and energy. Step 1. Track your inputs and outputs. You can't identify your 20% if you don't know where your time is going and what results you're getting, so you track. For 1 week, write down everything you do, every task, every activity, every meeting, and next to each one, note, what result did this create? Did it move me forward? Did it create value? Or was it just busy work? At the end of the week, you analyze, you look for patterns. Which activities created the most value? Which relationships energized you? Which tasks actually moved your goals forward? Those are your 20%. Everything else is your 80%. The busy work, the low value activities, the things that feel productive but don't actually create results. I did this with my work. I tracked every task for a week, and I realized 80% of my results came from writing and creating content, but I was only spending 20% of my time on it. The rest was meetings, emails, administrative work, low value activities. So I flipped it. I protected 80% of my time for writing and delegated or eliminated the rest. And my output doubled. Not because I worked more, because I focused on what mattered. Step 2. Eliminate, delegate, or minimize the 80%. Once you've identified your low-value activities, you have three options. Eliminate them completely if they're not necessary. Delegate them to someone else if they need to be done but not by you. Or minimize them if they're necessary but not worth much time. The goal is to free up as much time as possible for your critical 20%. Most people resist this. They think, but these things need to get done. And maybe they do, but they don't need to be done by you. Or they don't need to be done as well as you're doing them. Or they don't need to be done at all. You're not eliminating important things. You're eliminating busy work. And that creates space for what actually matters. Here's how this looks in practice. Emails are low value for most people, so you batch them. Check email twice a day. Spend 30 minutes total instead of being available all day. Meetings are low value for most people, so you decline meetings that don't directly contribute to your goals, or you make them shorter, or you send someone else. You're not being rude, you're being strategic with your time. Step 3. Double down on your 20%. Once you've freed up time by eliminating the 80%, you invest that time in your 20%. The activities that create massive results, and you protect that time like your life depends on it, because it does. This is where your growth happens, where your results come from, where your future is built, and you don't let anything steal this time. For me, my 20% is creating content, writing, recording videos, building my message. That's what creates 80% of my results. So I protect time for it every single day. 2 hours minimum. No meetings, no distractions, no exceptions. And my growth has been exponential because I'm focused on what matters, not distracted by what doesn't. Now here's how you apply the 80-20 principle to every area of your life so you get better results across the board. In your work, identify the 20% of tasks that create 80% of your value. For most people, this is deep work, creating, problem solving, strategy, not emails, not meetings, not admin. So you protect time for deep work and you eliminate, delegate, or batch everything else, and your productivity explodes. In your relationships, identify the 20% of people who bring 80% of your joy, growth, and support. These are your core relationships, your deep friendships, your meaningful connections, and you invest in them. You protect time for them. Meanwhile, the 80% of relationships that drain you or feel obligatory, you minimize. You're not being selfish, you're being intentional about where your relational energy goes. In your health, identify the 20% of habits that create 80% of your well-being. For most people, this is sleep, exercise, and whole foods. Not complicated biohacks, not expensive supplements, just the basics done consistently. So you focus there. You protect sleep, you move your body, you eat real food, and you don't stress about optimizing the other 80% because it doesn't matter as much. In your learning, identify the 20% of knowledge that creates 80% of your results in any skill. When you're learning something new, you don't try to learn everything. You identify the core fundamentals, the critical concepts, the high leverage skills, and you master those first. Because once you have the 20%, you can figure out the rest. But most people get lost in the 80% and never master anything. In your goals, identify the 20% of goals that will create 80% of the life you want. Most people have too many goals. They're trying to do everything and they accomplish nothing. But if you identify the few goals that actually matter and focus there, you make massive progress. So you ruthlessly prioritize. You pick your top 3 goals and you say no to everything else until those are achieved. Here's what I want you to understand. The 80-20 principle isn't about doing less for the sake of doing less. It's about doing less of what doesn't matter so you can do more of what does. It's about focusing your energy on the critical few instead of spreading it across the trivial many. And when you do that, you accomplish more with less effort because you're working smart, not just hard. We covered what the 80-20 principle is. A small number of inputs create most outputs. We explained how to identify your 20%, track inputs and outputs, eliminate or minimize the 80%, double down on the 20%, and we showed how to apply it everywhere. Work, relationships, health, learning, and goals. Focus on the critical few. This principle is simple, but applying it requires courage because it means saying no a lot. It means cutting things that feel important but aren't. It means disappointing people who want your time for their priorities. It means being ruthlessly focused. And most people aren't willing to do that. They'd rather be busy than effective. But you're not most people. So here's your practice for today. Pick one area of your life, work, relationships, health, learning, goals, and ask, what's my 20%? What activities in this area create 80% of my results? Write them down. Then ask, what's my 80%? What am I spending time on that doesn't actually matter? And commit to cutting one thing from the 80% this week. Just one. And investing that time in your 20% instead. Let me know in the comments, what area are you going to apply 80-20 to first? And what's one thing you're cutting from your 80%? You don't need to do more. You need to do what matters. And the 80-20 principle shows you exactly what that is. Welcome to Working Smarter. This is where exponential results begin.